Cody Bumgardner, author of the book Making Sense of Edge Computing with Manin Publications. What is the social significance of edge computing?
I think it's a similar answer to many technologies when we're talking about social significance and what's the significance of say, cloud computing. It's just a different form of computing. I think the big difference between edge computing and cloud computing and other kind of forms of distributed computing is that there are certain things that as we increase the number of devices, the rates of data growth, AI inference models that need to be run everywhere, that there's just going to be some tasks that you just cannot complete without edge computing. And I personally, we don't go around talking about how we have cloud-based email. It just becomes the norm. So I believe in 5 to 10 years that as device growth continues, that this will just be a form of computing that is essentially used everywhere. But we're not used to doing this. So the significance from the social aspect, or what if all of the data that was generated around you or by you or in conjunction with you or a community was actionable with AI models or just informing your daily life or health or those sort of things. And that's what we're really talking about with edge computing is where do we operate on those data points? Do we do them on your device on the phone? Or do we do that back in some cloud data center? Does your physician get that information, or should they get a summary of inferred events that then kind of can protect your privacy? So I just think of a globally connected world. You have to think about how we actually go about processing and dealing with that data. And that's what edge computing is really for the problems it's trying to solve.
So it's something that end users may not necessarily see, but it already touches all of us. It's just that it's like a paradigm at theoretical level and something that has to do with the infrastructure at practical level. It's not an application. It's not something that the end user is aware of, but it's already there.
Yeah, it's there. I mean, think about the AI assistants in your house, your Alexa or whatever you happen to use. That is definitely an edge device. It's sitting there. It's not supposed to be listening and sending all that data back to the company. Sometimes, of course, they get caught doing that. But what's supposed to happen is that it's listening for a wake word. And this is a good example because it shows that there's this AI inference taking place on this little device that you've decided to put in your home. And what's supposed to happen is that your speech is only supposed to listen for certain words to wake it up and then start transmitting data. So that's a really good example of there being a device that's you've put in your home, and in the deal that you've made with the manufacturer is that it won't send all of your data back, but it'll wait until you ask it a question and then it'll start doing those sort of things. But yeah, so I think consumers and everybody will interact with edge computing, but they may not. Certainly, as it continues on, they won't think of it as edge computing. They will just think of it as technology and computing. But as far as developers, certainly hardware makers, communications companies, the bigs like the Googles and the Amazons, and then they're all making investments in edge computing, and some of that's in physical infrastructure, and some of it is in frameworks and software that are really just dealing with this massive of streaming data that is being generated.